Okay, my name's Carter Terenzini. I am the town administrator for Templeton, and this next hour is what we call Talk of the Town, in which I have a department head, a local citizen, or a state or other official to talk about things that are going on in Templeton or are of general interest. Today I have with me our Veterans Services Officer, and I'm going to ask her just to, start with a little bit about who she is and what her background is, and then we'll go from there. Sheila?
Thank you, Carter. My name is Sheila Pelletier. I live here in Templeton with my husband, Mike Everard. I started in the military in 1985, so I served just over 30 years. I served in the reserves and the infantry in Devons, and then I moved over to the National Guard for the remainder of those 30 years. I've done such things as, actually, I started as a computer programmer in the reserves and moved over to logistics. And then from there, I started my computer career in the civilian world, while I maintained operations and logistical support within my military training. Towards the end of my career, I ended up being the Emergency Management Agency liaison for the National Guard, and I was at the MEMA site deploying National Guardsmen for state emergencies. I finally retired in 2016, and in 2017, I left my computer software company as their implementation and support manager. When I applied for this position, when Carter offered it, it was a really great way to give back to the veterans in our community and be a better service to the community.
So let's start with, first, you violated one of my cardinal rules.
Uh-oh.
You used an acronym without explaining to the community what it was. So I have an invisible ruler I bring out, MEMA. For the folks out there that might not know what MEMA is, help them understand that, please.
MEMA is your Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. When the state has a crisis, whether it's a natural disaster, a hurricane, a snowstorm, or they're having an event, a large event like the Boston Marathon, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, who works full-time, will stand up their operations, and they have key players from all services, meaning utilities, transportation, health, hospitals, all gather in the bunker in Framingham. And from there, they are able to see what needs to be done when the communities report up to them that maybe they're having trees falling and they need their assistance. A couple years ago, it was shoveling out fire hydrants, helping keep the roads plowed. So that's what MEMA does, is they manage all the emergencies at a high level, and everybody that sits in that office actually has one phone call to make everything happen. So it's a pretty powerful place to be.
And that's the agency that works above it with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and then, as you said, below it with the state and other local agencies. For instances such as the Stone Bridge, just this past August, or last March, some of our snowstorms. Now, you used a term that is bounced around quite a lot, but folks may not know exactly what you mean. Logistics. You said a lot of your work was related to logistics. What kind of work is that, and what does that mean to the citizens here in Templeton?
Logistics is really getting anything, a commodity, from point A to point B, whether that is making sure that we have repair parts for vehicles, or transportation to get our people from one place to another. People are logistics, are commodities as well. So it's really about making sure that everything is taken care of, that we have enough chairs to sit on, that we have enough vehicles to perform fuel, food to support our troops,
Cots for
Cots.
emergency shelters, if that's what you were asked to do.
Yep, and cots. So it's really having a operational view of what you have on hand and things that you may need looking forward, so planning 3-6 months out to see what you're going to need and then logistically bring everything in so that in the military the training can take place or the mission can be completed.
So you spent 30 plus years, you said, with the National Guard and the reserves?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And were you deployed at any time
I was deployed.
during that period?
I was deployed in 2003 to 2004, which was the beginning of the Iraq War, and we were stationed in Talil, which was actually that was the location that they had the firefight, and a few people in the maintenance company were taken hostage.
And how long have you lived in Templeton now?
I've lived in Templeton for between 4 and 5 years.
And what brought you to this community? There's different things. I know that when I picked a particular community I moved to, there may have been something about it, whether it was just the feel of the community or the housing or the schools for my kids. What drew you and your husband to Templeton?
Funny you should ask that, Carter. I lived in Ashby on 119. My husband lived in Hubbardston. We knew that we wanted to get a house together somewhere, so we looked around, and we found that Templeton was a warm community, and I'm from the country in Indiana, so it kind of gave me that feeling of being home, and I don't like my neighbors next to me. So Templeton really kind of envelops all of that.
So a little bit of that rural feeling that reminded you home, good geography, location for where you were working, where you were commuting to, and the like. Super. Now, you are our Veterans Services Officer, and that's unique in Massachusetts, in which a range of services for our veterans and our veteran spouses in some
Yes.
circumstances are delivered. So let's talk a little bit first of who you deliver service to, and then we can talk about what those kinds of services are.
Absolutely. So I actually deliver services to not just the veteran spouses, and sometimes their dependents, depending on their age. There are programs out
The
there.
age of the dependents.
Correct.
Okay.
I also help with maybe if somebody is related to a veteran and has questions. A lot of elderly veterans are out there, so I see their children or maybe a sister come in. And of course, I'll help anybody that comes in that has a question regarding veterans.
Now, these services are provided under a Massachusetts general law. What is that chapter?
This position is actually created under Chapter 115 of Massachusetts General Law, and it provides for every town or community to have a veteran service officer that the people in that community can come to. So I service this community.
And the VSO, Veteran Service Officer, must be a veteran, correct? Am I remembering that correctly?
That is correct.
Okay. And what is the range of services that the statute calls for? And I know you provide for, you go above and beyond, but let's just talk about the base basket of services under the statute first, if we might.
First and foremost, what I do is manage the Chapter 115 benefits, and that's for our veterans that are out in the community that cannot provide for themselves, that they meet certain financial standards, and they can come to me, and Chapter 115 allows me, if they qualify, to help them and supplement their income.
What are those income limits in general?
They differ, and every year they change, and a lot of things fall into it. I hate to give you a number, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you 2,000 is a good idea. That doesn't mean if you make more or less.
That's a month.
That's a month.
Oh,
It,
we're not expecting anybody to live on $2,000 a year.
no, no, absolutely not. But it's a mathematical equation that takes in the bills that you pay, what you pay for your house or rent, fuel, medical. So there's a lot of things that come into it in order to qualify for it. But once you're in the system, it's really easy. So.
And do we pay that benefit directly to the veteran or to their spouse, or do we pay the drugstore? Do we pay the landlord? Do we pay the fuel dealer? How do these payments work? So I come in and I see you and I fill out some paperwork and you say, "Yep, I've looked at the formula," and they need to provide some documentation, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
And I've looked at your documentation and you are eligible for. You fill in the number. How does that actually work mechanically?
It's all computerized, so to be able to tell you how it works mathematically, I'm not sure. But
The Excel spreadsheet tells you.
it's actually a computer program.
Yep.
And it's hooked up to Boston. But it does take into account how much money you bring in and the bills that you have. So I plug in those numbers and I hit a calculate button, and it will tell me if you qualify for ordinary benefits, fuel benefits, medical benefits.
So there's different categories of benefits.
Yes.
Okay. And the fuel benefit, is that paid to the dealer? Is it paid to the veteran or to the veteran's spouse?
So as long as the veteran can handle their financial accounts, I normally bring it to the veteran. It's their money. However, if I find that they're behind in their fuel, I do have the ability to pay the fuel bill directly or to pay maybe the landlord directly with working with them. And sometimes I do pay the spouse because the veteran themselves are not able to sign a check.
Okay, so this is a one-by-one decision based upon either the situation they're in, or perhaps their memory is failing, or some of these kinds of things as folks get older. And is this all age-driven, or what constitutes a veteran? Because I've been in different states where, you could have been X numbers of years in the military, but if you weren't in between a certain given period or hadn't been deployed, or, there were different definitions for the purposes of that particular statute. And that was always difficult to explain to somebody. Thank you very much for your service, but you missed this time period and that time period. I'm sorry, we can't help you in this instance.
That is a very important question that you just asked, because different agencies think of veterans in a different way. For instance, Massachusetts, I wish I had it here so I could quote it, but Massachusetts is basically saying that you have to serve on active duty for over 180 days in an active duty capacity, not for training. What that really breaks down to is if all you've ever done is National Guard and reserves, and you've never done any active duty outside of training, you may not qualify as a veteran for Massachusetts benefits. You may. There's a lot of gray area here. But the VA has a completely different set of rules what a veteran is. And theirs is broader, actually, than the Massachusetts one is. So saying, what is a veteran? If you're going to go out to a park and everybody says, if you're a veteran, stand up. If you served one day in the military, you're a veteran. If you go and apply for mass benefits, then you have to meet what their veteran guidelines is, which is 180 days on active duty. If you get hurt, those things change. And then if you're in the VA and you want to file a claim, they also have a different set of what a veteran is in their system. So that's one of the reasons that you'd want to come to me, is so that we can look at your DD 214 and really see
You
what.
just did it.
Oops.
Every
Look at
veteran
your
out there watching,
discharge.
every veteran out there watching knows what a DD 214 is, and just about anybody in town government who's had to process one. But there are lots of folks that aren't going to know what that is.
It's your discharge papers. And we would need to look at all your discharge papers. Normally, your last one needs to be an honorable discharge. There are processes to get around that and to have that changed. They're just lengthy.
So the Department of Defense Form 214, the discharge papers. Okay. So, but I want to back up because certainly we thank everyone, whether they've given a day or more, because sometimes it depends on what branch they were in, what was going on nationally, internationally, as to the length of their active service, if they're called up or not. So I come in and I see you, and I bring my DD 214 because I know you're going to need that. Now, are you able to get that for me if I've moved a couple times, I've lost it, I simply don't have it anymore? Are you able to, or do I have to go get that on my own and make sure I have it in hand when I come see you?
I can actually reach out to our military records office in Milford, Massachusetts, and ask for a copy of the DD 214, your discharge papers, and they will give me your discharge papers. So normally that's within a day. If they don't have it, because they are missing some, you would need to then go out to the National Personnel Records Center, and that will be a lengthy time. But at this point, everybody I've asked for, they have been able to find their discharge papers.
So it's best if you have it, because there are delays if you can't get it from the Milford office.
Yes.
So now, so I come in and I see you, and I don't. I was in the Guard for 20 years, or I was in the reserves for 20 years, but I simply never got called up for that active duty. What do you do for me? I mean, is it just, I'm sorry, Carter, there's nothing we can do for you today, or? And I ask this knowing she does go above and beyond. So,
well, that is an interesting question. If you're retired from the reserves and National Guard, then you can fall in with certain veteran programs, and we can get you into those. But if you're somebody who worked for the National Guard or the Army Reserves, and you didn't do your 20 years, so you didn't retire, and you never did any active duty, then there are programs out there that will help you as well. So if you come in, explain your issue to me, then I'll reach out and give you some resources that you can go to and call or visit, and they are helping you. There's so many organizations in Massachusetts that's willing to help anybody who has served.
So you may not be able to actually do the legwork for them or process paperwork for them, but you have a fairly large pool of other resources available that you can refer people to?
Right. I actually have, the VA is a huge resource, and they have given me a large brochure. I know a gentleman came in and they were looking for housing, and he left with about 3 or 4 pages worth of information that he could go home and call in the privacy of his home and get the help that he needed.
So some affordable housing options needed.
There's affordable housing, there's emergency repairs, there is Section 8 housing for veterans. There's actually home loans out there. There's just so much information.
How many veterans, active or retired or long serving, but perhaps hadn't put in there? Do we have any idea of how many of these citizens who contributed to the safety and security of our nation live here in Templeton?
There's not a definite answer to that. We do our city polls, and if you select veteran when you do the annual, what's it called?
The annual census?
The annual census. If you select that, that comes into our number. That's about 515, 520 that we have checking that, which is one reason why it's really important, especially since it's coming up, if you are a veteran, to check that box. It's for no other reason than to help me do my job and get the word out to you of what benefits you may have. We also have the national census, and they put us up around 810. So that's a huge difference. That's about 300 veterans between what they're saying we have and what our town census is saying.
So somewhere between 6% and 10%, depending upon which database you look at. That annual census will be coming up, I believe, in early January. Comes from the town clerk's office. It's used for calculating a number of different programs and data at the state level, not so much at the federal level. But it is very important that you try to fill that out, get that back, and as Sheila points out, if you are a veteran, have served, it's important to check that box. The better data we have, the better case she can make to other agencies for you. So I want to go back a little bit to, I come in and I see you. I give you all my information, all my data, copies of everything. And all this is confidential, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
Okay. Because I notice even when we put these things through for payment, we don't use names, we use a case number. And the state tells you that you can pay on behalf of or to this person, this veteran or this veteran's spouse, a certain number of dollars. Does that all come from the general taxpayer? I mean, I know every year I budget for it, but then I have a revenue item as well. How does that work, those reimbursements? And is it all reimbursable? Is it some of it not reimbursable? How does that work?
So I talked about that computer system that tells me how much money or what you're eligible for. That is decided upon up at the Department of Veterans Services, and they maintain that database. And when I have questions, I call up to them as well, and they're another huge resource.
And that's the Massachusetts Department of Veterans Services,
yes.
Okay.
And when they tell us how much money that we can pay somebody to help them with their monthly living expenses, the check is actually cut from the town and given to that veteran once a month. And I submit that up to the Massachusetts Department of Veterans Services, and they reimburse the town for 75% of what we provide our town citizens.
So the taxpayer pays your salary and the costs of operating the office, a little bit of training or telephone, whatever's needed, and we pay the benefits, and then we get 75% of the benefits back from the state a year later on the cherry sheet.
Yes.
Okay. So spouses, are these current spouses? Are these surviving spouses? How does, when you say spouses independence, how does the relationship work there? Is it a divorced spouse in any instance?
It can be. There's rules for divorced spouses, of course.
Rules. Well, this is a Department of Defense in Massachusetts veteran-based system. There have to be rules.
So normally the spouses are, they can still be married if, let's say, the veteran is on the Chapter 115, the benefits that they get paid monthly, and he's married. We have to take both of their incomes into the equation. And then that check goes to the veteran, but it's to support his family, so a spouse is involved there. If a veteran died and he was maybe a combat veteran and he passes away, his wife can come in and apply for benefits. And the VA has a pension program for both the veteran and the spouse, aid in attendance as they get older and they need somebody to come in. So that's how the spouse comes into the picture. And then children under 23 usually have some sort of educational benefit.
23, not 18.
Not 18.
And geared towards assisting them with some college tuition or technical school or
Yes.
what kind of educational benefits are available?
It all depends on what the veteran has. If the veteran had a disability in the VA that's over, actually I'm not 100% sure what the veteran disability has to be, but they offer an educational benefit to the children, and then you apply for that, and then the children will get a assistance in their college above and beyond the GI Bill.
Now, through our Board of Assessors, the state law provides some exemptions toward property taxes that are based upon your level of service and some other things. And do we help people with that, or is that really just best people should contact Luann Royer over in the assessor's office, because she knows all of her particular rules?
Actually, we work closely together. In fact, I try to make it a point to understand what each person here in the community and town hall, what their job is, so that if you have a question, I know who to go to. And I work with Luann to make sure that I understand what the veteran needs to do and what the guidelines are. So if they come into my office, I can let them know that that's a benefit that they can have.
Do you recall that there's a time frame on that? You can't just apply, I don't think, any time of the year for those property exemptions or credits. Do you recall what that is at all, by any chance?
Not off the top of my head.
But if they contact you, you'd be able to
Yes.
have that at your fingertips a little bit better. Okay, so now we've talked a little bit about the Chapter 115 program, how it applies to veterans who have at least 180 days of active duty, their spouses, their surviving spouse, and their children under the age of 23. We've talked a little bit about other programs that they might be eligible through the Veterans Administration. We don't pay those benefits, but you can help them get their paperwork through. And we've talked a little bit about the basket of supportive agencies that you might be able to refer people to. But you also go above and beyond. Now we have the Veterans Advisory Board here in town. How many folks are on that?
There are currently 5 people on the Veterans Advisory Board.
And we actually have a few more that would like to serve if we can sort through an increase in that membership role at the Springtown meeting to make sure they're available, eligible
Yes.
to do that. What kinds of things does your Veterans Advisory Board do with you, for you, to you?
Well, the Veterans Advisory Board is, under Chapter 115, is there to assist me.
But we have to adopt a local bylaw, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But they're there to assist me. So as we talk about all these programs that are available, all the resources that are available, this board is really an extension of me. When I have ideas or when something's brought to me and I need their assistance, I bring that up in the board. I bring up things that we might talk about later, like the Veterans Park, a Veterans Luncheon. We talk about what are you feeling for veterans? What do we need to do to be available for veterans? Get the word out that there is a veteran service officer. So really, I use them as my sounding board. I use them for information, and I use them to because I don't feel as one person that I should be making decisions for 500 to 800 veterans by myself. So I use that committee to really help and guide me and help find information.
So it's extra voices of the community of things that are important to them, an extra set of voices to the community of what's important to veterans and what we need to be doing. And it's a sort of a extra set of boots on the ground to actually make things happen a little bit. Is that a fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So that has 5 members. We're going to be looking at the annual town meeting of increasing that to 7 because we do have such a terrific group of interested persons, and we want to try to accommodate them for their active involvement to the extent that we can. Now, you spoke of a veterans park. You spoke about veterans luncheon. Let's talk a little bit about the veterans luncheon. Is that weekly? Is that monthly? How often do you put that on? Where is it? Who can come? How do I find out about it? Is it good food? A friend of mine once called somebody and asked to be involved in some training, and said to the person putting it on, "I understand you have put on the best training." To which the guy said, "Well, that's because I have the best snacks." So what's this luncheon, and what's it about? Do you have speakers? How does that work?
Well, first of all, if I can just say, the Veterans Advisory Board is open to any veteran that would like to come as well, because like I said, it gives you the voice on things that are coming through. So I wanted to make that clear, that if you're a veteran, you want to come to the Veterans Advisory Board, the third Tuesday of every month at the Legion at 6:30. Feel free to come down, and it's a great
So there might be a specific number of people who can actually vote on things, but it is open to everyone in general, and they're allowed to speak on anything?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, okay, terrific.
The board, the board doesn't actually vote on what I do and I don't do. It's more of a group of people that come in and collaborate. So the Veterans Luncheon, Carter, it is the last Thursday of every month. It is the time that I take. It's at 11:30, and it's being held at the Senior Center. It is the time that I take to have veterans show up, have a meal. We've actually make it ourselves, so we don't go and get pizza or cold sandwiches or anything. We actually kind of take a poll the month before and ask what people want, and then we go out, we buy the stuff, and we prepare it. And I share the information that I've gathered over the last month, as well as I go and scour the internet for things that veterans might be interested in, such as Veterans Day is coming up, and there's tons of free food out there. So if you like food, there's plenty of places to get some free food.
So now, the last Thursday of every month at the Senior Center over off of Bridge Street, and any veterans welcome.
Okay.
What time of day?
11:30.
11:30, okay. So come on over, 11:30, last Thursday of every month, Senior Center off of Bridge Street, to not only get some free food, but to share some stories, perhaps meet folks that served as you did, just not in your unit or that you haven't met before, so a chance to broaden some social network as well, as do those kinds of things. Now, the Veterans Park. Let's talk a little bit about Veterans Park, what it is, where it is. You've kind of, I forget the phrase that was used to reflect upon it, but it's not quite volunteered. It's a combination of those. But you've taken this task on, and we thank you for that. But talk a little bit about that. Voluntold. I think that's the phrase that somebody uses. Voluntold. But in this case, you actually did volunteer, again, above and beyond, and we thank you for that. Talk to us a little bit about what the intent of this is, what the timeline is, what you hope to do, and how people can help.
Absolutely. So the Veterans Park is at 4 Elm Street in Baldwinville. It's right beside the river. I don't know what the property used to be used for.
It was an old town hall many moons ago.
We are working on, the theme is by veterans, for veterans. It's going to be a living park, meaning it's not going to be a memorial to all the veterans that have passed away. Each town does have memorials in usually their town common. So we've decided that we want it to be a living park, so it'll be the Veterans Park. And right now we had hoped that we would have a school that could draw up some plans for us. I reached out to my Air Force friend, and he was able to draw those up. So we just received some plans, presenting them to the Legion and to other veterans, to my Veterans Advisory Board, as well as at Veteran Luncheon, and get their intake on how they feel that park is going to work with that plan. We'll revise it, and I actually have somebody coming in. She's volunteering to help me with all the planning, because it's quite a lot of work to go from basically empty ground to building it up to a park. So we'll hopefully have a list of all the things we need to do and have a timeline and an estimate on when we plan to open this up. But we really want to start working on it in the spring and summer. But we have some big things that we have to figure out before we can actually put a date to when the park's going to open. We're going to be having a few volunteer days to cut back the costs so that we can get it open sooner than later. And if anybody has any ideas or know of people who are willing to volunteer or who may donate materials, please feel free to reach out to me, and we'll put their name on a list so that when we have everything together, we can reach out to them with numbers.
And to reach out to you, they can. You do have some office hours here in Town Hall. Try to keep them relatively fixed. Sometimes a training or something else bumps those. But what are your general office hours?
I'm normally in the office on Tuesday from 1:30 to 4:30, and Thursday morning from 9 to noon. However, if you call my cell phone number and I'm not available, I'm always willing to set up a time to come in and visit with you.
And your office here in Town Hall, if people come in from the parking lot, is the very last one on the left, just after the Selectman's office. But they can also send you an email.
Yes, they can send me an email at Veterans Services, that's both plural. So there's Veteran S Services with an S at the end at templeton1.org.
Now, I like this by veterans for veterans, but non-veterans are certainly welcome to participate, to help get this built, to honor those who've given service to the community. Yes, am I?
Absolutely. It's going to be a veterans park, but we want the community involvement as well. It's really going to be a part that I want everybody to share in and be proud of. Even though it's a veterans park, I want the community to feel like that's a place that they can go and hang out for the day and enjoy the beauty and the serenity from the water. So yes, like I said, if anybody wants to volunteer, I would never turn away anything that anybody would like to do for us.
Now, I know to the extent you can, because nothing's etched in stone at this point, the Baldwinville Elementary School's been looking at potential reuses of the building. Mm-hmm. Earlier on, you mentioned housing and services by other groups, and you've been working to try to perhaps generate some interest in the reuse of that building for veterans. Are you able to talk about any of that at all? And I know it's really way, way, way from being a reality. It may never be a reality, but this is something that you, again, above and beyond, have brought to the table for the community.
Right. So any veterans out there, or if you're looking for veteran information, you will know that it's not local to this area. There's a place in Gardner that the Massachusetts Veterans Outreach Center is one resource, but there's just not a lot when you start coming into the western part of the state for veterans. So this would be a great opportunity in Baldwinville to have some veteran services move in. So I've reached out to organizations like the Massachusetts Veterans Outreach Center, Soldier On. There's a few others. There's about 4 or 5 that are actually interested in obtaining this school and turning it into some sort of veteran resource, housing, maybe some counseling. The Vet Center, it's a resource center for therapy, has expressed some interest of maybe when things get moving to put an office in there. and bring something closer to the northern part of Massachusetts. So there's a lot of interest, and we have a good building, so they're very excited.
Now, I'm sure you've probably been looking at some of my notes to try to get a head start on some of the questions, but I happen to notice on your note, under mass benefits, you have the word bonus. You have the Chapter 115 and the need for the DD 214. What did you mean by that? Is there a bonus program for having enlisted, for enlisting? What's that all about?
Well, those kind of bonuses for enlisting are handled by the recruiters of the branch that they're enlisting in, and they change all the time. However, the bonus that I was referring to is if you served overseas and in an area of combat, you are eligible for a bonus from the state, and I have the paperwork depending on when you served and the time frame and how many times you've served overseas. The amount of money that they would pay to you will differ, but you do get a bonus for that. And
Do you find that the vast majority of veterans in Templeton are aware of these resources and benefits for them, or is it not well known? And how do you go about trying to get the word out?
That's a great question. I don't believe that there's veterans out there, especially the younger population and the older population, aren't as aware of the programs and the veteran service officer that they have in their community. So I always try to make myself known. I hand out business cards whenever somebody gives me a hand and they get a card, because I want people to know that there are resources out there for them, and that the reason the state feels it's necessary to have me in this community and every community is what an important role that we play to reach out to these veterans. So word of mouth is big, and then I leave my business cards with people who seem semi-interested, just so if they run into somebody, they have my information in their back pocket that they can share.
So if you're watching this, you may not be eligible for any of these programs by yourself, but making sure that a veteran you know of, or and that could be your son, your daughter, a friend of a friend, a neighbor, is aware that these programs are here. They are your right. It is one way that the community, the state, the federal government go about repaying what you've done for us. Always start with Sheila here in Town Hall, drop in. Better yet, if you have the time, send her that email, set up that appointment so that you've got a fixed time and you know she's going to be in the office and you aren't sitting in a chair waiting for 40 or 45 minutes, getting frustrated. So let's talk then about, let's say that I find out that a friend of a friend is not aware of these, and I refer them, and they're able to come in and they send you that email and you get them in 2-3 days. What is the timeline from, can you tell me what's going on, I'm eligible for that benefit, until we're able to get that benefit into their hands physically?
Okay. For Chapter 115, of course, you can come into my office. If I feel, I'll do a quick estimate to see where you qualify. You then have to go and get the paperwork. I've actually had people come back the very same day with all the paperwork that was required. I put them in the system. I wait for the Boston to approve. Normally that's what I do here in this town, but there's no requirement for them to be approved. And then I put a warrant into the town. So I put a request to pay them in the town. And so normally that's about a week, 2 weeks that you'll get your first check, and then you'll be along the same schedule as the other people getting Chapter 115.
So now you spoke a little bit about the paperwork that's required, and we've suggested if you don't have a DD 214 already in hand, we might be able to get it for you in under a day from the office in Massachusetts, but it could take a longer time than that if she has to go for the national search. What are the kind of paperwork is required that you're saying they have to go and get their paperwork?
So normally if you're going to do the Chapter 115, of course you need your discharge papers, your marriage papers if you're married, if you're, 3 bank statements from all your bank statements. You'll need, if you rent, a rent receipt, a mortgage paper, your bills, your taxes, your fuel bill. Those are the kind of paperwork that
So the typical kinds of documents, if I have a checking account, 3 months of my checking account, maybe my last income tax form, the typical kinds of forms that people are familiar with in general for proving what my income is and what my expenses are. Okay. And it, dependent upon that, within about 2 weeks, we can actually get some assistance into people's hands.
Yes.
Now, what if you say to them, unfortunately, you're a touch over the limit, but I can work with you. Do you actually file their VA paperwork? Do we give that to them and they have to go to, where do you actually go to file that?
You can actually come here. It's one of the things that I've been charged to do is help with VA paperwork. It is a sea of paperwork sometimes, but they're trying to get better and they're trying to automate. So you can definitely come here. I can help you fill out that paperwork. If you want us to stay on top of that paperwork, I'll have you fill out a form allowing us to look and talk to the VA regarding your case.
So the VA knows that, yes, Vernon veteran has applied, but I can talk with Sheila Pelletier on his behalf because the veteran signed this paper.
Yes, that's true. I normally reach up to our Boston department. They're right across the hall. And they'll go and work their magic usually. But yes, you can come in and ask me questions, and then it gives me the ability to call up and find out what the status of your case is. If there's paperwork, I can help you fill out the extra paperwork. Sometimes they want another statement or they want something from a doctor. So I just had a lady who received something in the mail about the dental program. It's the first time I'm hearing about it. So when I get out of this meeting, I will go over there and do some research for her so that next week when she does come in, I can guide her through the process of signing up for the new dental program.
When you say we're right across from each other, the Massachusetts Department of Veteran Services is right across from the Federal Veteran Services. Is that what you mean? Because they're not here in Town Hall.
No, they're not here in Town Hall. They're actually in Boston, and I'm
Okay.
talking about the Department of Veteran Services has 3 National Service Officers that are certified by the VA. Because I'm part of that organization, the Department of Veteran Services, they allow us to file the claims. And it actually, when I file the claims, I send it up to our Department of Veteran Services National Service Officer. They review the claim, and if they see anything missing, they'll reach out to me, and then they'll file that claim with the VA. So there's 2 sets of eyes that'll see your VA claim before it's there, so you have a much more a greater likelihood of having everything in place.
So you can help start getting all the information here together, getting it into Boston, but then someone who's lives, sleeps, eats, and breathes those VA regulations can kind of help take over and be the next sort of push through the pipeline of the materials.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, is there a charge for these services at all? You've outlined quite a few services that people can come to you for, advice they can come to you for. Do we have any charges for any of these services at all?
We only require that you have a smile and a good attitude, but we do not charge any monetary fees.
Are you telling me you don't deal with grumpy veterans?
No. No.
Okay. Well, a smile and a good attitude, I think, is coming from you is always good for all of us to have. I know that some of these programs can get really kind of overwhelming, and sometimes you need that extra piece of paperwork. Or when you said warrant, that's what we use to pay bills. Sheila fills out a form and puts on the code, the department code, signs it, and attaches the proper paperwork, and that has to be in by a given day, or unfortunately it misses the accounting cycle. And so I can understand where some of that can happen from time to time. Now, Veterans Day is coming up here on the 11th of November, and it will be 100 years this year. Any particular local events going on? I know that much of this viewing will be done after Veterans Day, but there will be some folks that see it a bit before then.
And that's a great question, especially now when people are wanting to volunteer and do something for veterans. Next Sunday, I believe at 9:30 at the Veterans Cemetery in Winchington, there will be a ceremony.
And that's Sunday the
11th.
Okay.
And on the same day at 10 o'clock, there will be a ceremony in Baldwinville Common held by the Legion.
And it's more than just the day off. It is intended to be a day to remember all of those who've fallen. And we certainly hope that folks will attend some of these events that are out there.
Absolutely.
Do we have a sense of how many folks from Templeton have given the ultimate sacrifice?
I unfortunately don't have that. That is on my list of things to do in the next year, is not only get a good list of the veterans that have passed away, but also to work with the cemetery department and make sure that we have a good count of what veterans are in our cemeteries, as well as making sure that they do get properly respected with a flag.
How do you find people's attitudes? I know when I was of military age, some of the veterans were not treated with the kind of respect we would hope for. How have you seen that change over your career, particularly now? You have a different view of it.
I feel that definitely a better attitude towards the veterans coming home from deployments. It has greatly improved. And the reaching out to Vietnam veterans is actually really increasing, and people are very warm to them, and the smile on their face when they finally get thanked for their service means so much to them. So I think in general, even though we see things on the news, we have to remember that is the news. And when people do come home, they're being welcomed with open arms and back into the community, and to be prideful of what they've done. And I think it's a welcoming community now.
Is there anything else you'd like to? We're wrapping up here. We're pretty much closing in on the amount of time that we try to allot to this small program. Is there anything else that you'd like to make the community aware of?
I know that we talked about certain programs and some, like Chapter 115, the VA, but there's also other things out there. So I guess what I want to say is that if you have any issues or any problems, or you want to know where do I find that free ticket to the concert, because there is a place to go for free tickets to concerts, just reach out to me, because if you have a question, I'll find that answer if I don't have it in my office.
Okay. So office hours, let's just remind people, Tuesdays and Thursdays are?
Tuesday afternoon from 1:30 to 4:30, and Thursday morning from 9 to noon.
And your email, which is a great way if you have a question that's really not worth the trip in. And she does often have people in the office, so we don't want you to have to sit and wait till you get a chance to chat with her. Your email again is?
Veterans Services both plural, so veteran s services s at templeton1.org.
Well, Sheila, let me thank you for your service to the community in both roles, both in your paid roles with the Guard and the Reserve, and now as our Veterans Service Officer. I do appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you, Carter.
My name's Carter Terenzini. I am the Town Administrator of Templeton. This has been Talk of the Town.